So now we talked about this a couple of weeks ago here, and that is that, to my sense right now, the government is split down the middle. It's very dangerous territory that the government's in. And in many ways, it is the Israel-Hamas situation that is actually causing a big rift in the middle of our Labor Party. Now, as you know, some Labor politicians and ministers have been very, very slow to condemn what took place. The Prime Minister's come out and eventually said stuff. But the whole issue of Anthony Albanese as a strong Prime Minister, well, that's coming into question, not only on this issue because the party is kind of split, but there's a whole lot of other stuff. There's the cost of living stuff, for example. You know, voters now start to think that he may be, well, a bit bland, right? That, you know, the whole point, James Campbell wrote in the Daily Telegraph today all this, the polling group Redbridge has come out and said focus groups looking at Anthony Albanese's performance. One focus group member said he hasn't really addressed the cost of living. And I get there's global factors at play, but I don't think he's done much concrete action on it. Remember, there's a government that's in surplus. They could actually do more if they wanted to.
Correct.
There's another scathing response was he's not a leader, he's a follower, he's a beta male. Oh. So are these two grumpy outliers, are they emblematic of the voting nation? Paul?
Can I just say, even as the Prime Minister's greatest fan, I don't think anyone who would use the term beta male about the Prime Minister was really on his side of the first place. That's fine, and these are self-identifying independent groups. But there has been a shift. I mean, I was just I'm going to make this point in a couple of hours on the lesser program that'll be on this evening, which is which was where we were at the end of last year. At the end of last year, we know the Prime Minister was soaring, the numbers were high, all the rest of it. Well, here he is 12 months later, and even The Guardian writes a headline saying the majority of Australians aren't where he is. For excited Liberals, OK, the lesson isn't Prime Minister going down. The lesson is, look what can change in a year. And who knows where we will be in a year. Most likely the interest rate rise, we were talking about it before, probably not due tomorrow.
And we may not get another one. There's the reality of it.
Correct.
There may not be another interest rate rise.
The government's going to be, fingers crossed as hard as they can, that eventually the monthly and then quarterly inflation numbers start to taper off. But as I've pointed out many times before, the numbers within the numbers still show petrol way high, power way high. So what this exposes for the government is, and they're falling into a trap, which is when you become the government, you get very excited by talking about the big number or finding the biggest number you possibly can to spin at people, like $26 billion of cost of living relief. OK, who gets it? All right, minimum wage, you know, percentage over here, 500 over there, 2,000 over there. But guess what? The millions and millions that will decide your fate in the middle don't get anything, which is why I keep banging on about the petrol scenario. The Prime Minister will be desperately hoping, and here's just random tip, Joe might know he's the one staying over this summer. But I think the Prime Minister will go quiet for the 2 weeks into Christmas and then be very visible Christmas to New Year. And some people who are hard heart but political head people will be fingers crossed that there'll be some bushfires over summer so he can get an attempt to reset. Because if we wake up to the economic situation we are now in January, with the government still telling us everything is awesome, as Redbridge also found in their polling, that there's a view of this Prime Minister that is hardening about the concept of competence. And if he wakes up in early January exactly where we are with no reset, no local or global event that offers reset, then incompetence will be what he has to overcome next year.
And you cannot understate the issue of boats arriving. You cannot understate the issue of the High Court decision, you know, sort of detainees into the community. This is the stuff that Australians absolutely detest in the government. There's no doubt about it.
I don't think he can afford to wait until after Christmas, let alone the New Year. I think he has to do something before people go to Christmas, because people will take whatever is the last thing they sort of registered of the real world, of the workaday world.
That's what you talk about on holidays.
That is what you talk about on holidays. That's what you mull over. That's what you stress about when you're thinking how much you can afford to spend on your kids or your family at Christmas, where you can afford to go in the new year, whether you'll have a job in the new year, whether you'll be going backwards in the new year. So again, I don't know if the PM is listening to this, but he certainly cannot afford to wait that long. And again, the golden rule in politics is you don't let things fester. If there is a boil there, you lance it, and you lance it good. If there's a stuff up, you acknowledge it, you apologise, and you fix it.
But hasn't that ship sailed like several times now throughout his prime ministership? We're now covered in boils. There has been no lances. No one takes responsibility in this government whatsoever. And Paul, you were saying he could benefit from like some sort of event, whether it's bushfires or some sort of global, I think it would just go, such an event, God forbid, it would just go to highlight his weakness even further, because this is a weak leader, which in and of itself is an oxymoron. But I think people who follow what's happening throughout the world as well now, we've got Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, we've got Javier Milei in Argentina, Giorgia Meloni in Italy, these Trumpian-style figures that keep rising to prominence as people around the world go, we are in flippin' precarious times and we want a strong person. These are all conviction politicians, and that is something Anthony Albanese has never been. He is not just a weak politician, he is a weak man, and that translates to the
he certainly does need to be stronger, but I think we've seen him get stronger and stronger on Israel. And he's someone who I think is very confident, and that can be a strength, but sometimes he can be overconfident, and that can lead to complacency.
But we know what Inner Albo likes fighting Tories, right? The one who won an election was the shapeshifter who was able to turn Bill Shorten's energy policy into $275 reductions plus 500,000 jobs falling from the sky. Why I say...
Yeah, he's very confident.
Yeah, correct. But why I talk about not glimmers of hope in that I'm not sitting around looking for the glimmers of hope, but why I think that you've got, you know, generally speaking, a media that's going to want to rehabilitate him as soon as possible. The reason I say things like bushfires, and again, please, I know someone's going to half interpret me, listen to what I'm actually saying here, which is that 2019 into 2020 became a physical example to a potential amount of wavering people about climate change, right? Whether I agree with that, whether I like that or not, but that's what it became. It became this visceral moment to say, we'll see what's happening, and you had an opposition that was doing that too. The only advantage Albanese has in current comparisons to Peter Dutton, because as the times start to move towards decisive leadership and people want a hard person and people want somebody who's going to rule the line under, is the concept of compassion. And I'm just saying is that it's a pretty low moment when you're hoping for the reboot for your Prime Ministership to become Cuddler-in-Chief at a time when people are not at work, looking around and going, oh, OK, or I'll give him one last go, one last go.